Every major outlet ran the same headline. $50 billion, $75 billion, India-EU deal of the century. You read it, you may have shared it, you definitely believed it.
That number is not in the agreement. It was announced by a minister at a press conference and published by every newsroom in India without a single question asked. If you made any decision based on that number, you made it on fiction.
The only number the EU Commission officially confirmed is €4 billion per year in duty savings. Not 50 billion, not 75 billion, 4 billion. And that projection everyone quoted? It assumes the world stays stable through 2031. Russia is still at war. Iran is threatening the Strait. China is circling Taiwan. Today we show you what the deal actually says, who created the 75 billion number, and why the real story is more important than anything the media quoted.
You're watching Voice on Pages, where capital logic replaces capital noise. Subscribe if you think in systems.
So where did these massive forecasts actually come from? Let's trace it back to January 27th. Piyush Goyal held a press conference and threw out a specific long-term projection for potential incremental Indian exports. Major financial publications, places like Business Today, took that higher $75 billion figure and ran it twice in a single cycle. They treated it as absolute certainty. You won't find the words projection or estimate anywhere in those headlines. And that other $50 billion variant you might have seen floating around, that came from an MK Global analyst note, estimating trade surplus gains extending all the way out to fiscal year 2031.
But if you sit down and actually read the free trade agreement text or its supplementary annexes, the math simply is not there. You can scour the official European Commission documentation, the legal scrubbing drafts, and the bilateral statements from end to end. The massive projections cited by the press do not exist in any legally binding framework. They're entirely disconnected from the ink on the page. Basically, the media substituted an analyst's best-case scenario for verified, actionable policy. It's like a real estate developer stating an apartment building could double in value over a decade. And then the media immediately publishes an article declaring that prices have doubled as an absolute current fact. The word could just vanished entirely from the public consciousness. That is precisely the journalistic failure that occurred here.
If we want to move past the headlines, we have to look at the actual policy architecture agreed upon by both blocs. The forensic reality of this agreement is publicly accessible on the European Union's official trade website, completely devoid of media spin. This is where the verifiable data lives, stripped of the noise of daily news cycles. And the only officially confirmed metric is €4 billion. That represents the annual duty savings for exporters once the agreement is fully implemented. It's a recurring, compounding figure that applies every single year the deal holds firm.
The actual mechanics of the deal, though, are highly specific and structurally profound. For example, tariffs on European cars imported into India will fall from a highly restrictive 110% down to just 10% over a defined phase-out period. In return, the Indian pharmaceutical and textile sectors will see deeply prohibitive duties eliminated entirely from day one. In total, 96.6% of European goods and 99.5% of Indian goods secure preferential, duty-free access. This framework covers a combined, verified baseline trade volume of $136.5 billion in goods alongside $83 billion in services. As you can see, the real question for global markets is not the hypothetical size of future trade, it is whether it compounds at all.
And that brings us to the primary flaw in the media's forecast. It assumes a perfectly static environment. A 5-year projection inherently requires 5 completely stable years. It completely ignores current geopolitical realities and ongoing conflicts that threaten global commerce.
Systemic risk is actively being priced into global supply chains right now. Just look at India's crude oil imports. 20.5% is sourced directly from Iraq. And every single one of those barrels must pass through the highly vulnerable Strait of Hormuz to reach its destination.
Geopolitical threats operate on immediate timelines, completely indifferent to economic models. Within 1 year, the Strait of Hormuz could be severely compromised, choking off critical energy supplies. A renewed United States trade war could easily materialize within 3 years, disrupting the global flow of capital. And by year 5, the pressure around Taiwan could fundamentally fracture the semiconductor chains required for the new ASML Tata Dolera fabrication plant to even function. Reporting these massive numbers is the equivalent of planning a cross-country road trip assuming absolutely no traffic, no weather events, and no construction delays, and then publishing your arrival time as a confirmed, unalterable fact. While the headlines focused entirely on abstract monetary values, the strategic reality being built underneath those headlines is strictly physical.
It is a deliberate realignment of infrastructure and capital flow.
Alongside the broader agreement, 17 specific strategic pacts were signed directly with the Netherlands. We are talking about the ASML-Tata Semiconductor Memorandum, the establishment of a green hydrogen corridor, and deep critical minerals cooperation. The real unlocked here is not a dollar amount. It is a supply chain architecture deliberately routing through the Netherlands, which is already India's largest European export destination at $22.36 billion. As we always say, capital doesn't follow safety, it follows logic over loyalty.
Voice on Page's creator Nitin spent 2 years running a business doing everything. 18-hour days, sleeping with a laptop, running ads, handling complaints, all at once, doing everything, completing nothing. Indian media did the exact same thing with this deal. Ran every headline, checked nothing. That confusion between being busy and being productive cost Nitin $50,000 to learn. He wrote, "Stop being busy so it doesn't cost you that." Link in the description.
When you evaluate the true beneficiaries, you have to examine strategic positioning rather than raw export volume. The underlying structure of the free trade agreement reveals a highly specific winner. The geographic and technological advantages heavily favor Dutch integration. The data points directly to the Netherlands as the anchor point of this relationship. Bilateral trade currently sits at $27.8 billion, supported by a massive $55.6 billion in Dutch foreign direct investment into India. They simultaneously hold the technology choke point via ASML and the logistics choke point via the Port of Rotterdam. This actually represents a complete historical inversion of trade dynamics. In the 17th century, the Dutch East India Company extracted immense value from India, funneling it back through Rotterdam. Under the architecture of this modern agreement, India now ships its own value directly into Europe through that exact same port. The direction has entirely reversed. India has secured a definitive structural seat at the table. This is not merely a localized trade deal meant to boost quarterly export numbers. It is a massive, decade-long geopolitical calculation. The European Union is executing a deliberate strategy of economic repositioning.
Consider the precedent set by the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement back in 2020. The European bloc signed that deal with a one-party communist state because they calculated that pragmatic trade integration outpaced geopolitical friction. And it worked. Vietnam's exports to the EU surged, solidifying its position as the critical China Plus One hub the continent desperately needed. The EU is making the exact same structural calculation with India right now, prioritizing supply chain resilience even while New Delhi continues buying Russian oil at a massive discount. This isn't a story about an imagined financial windfall. It is a decade-long economic repositioning. The number that actually matters is the physical architecture, not the projection.
Because, in the end, capital doesn't have loyalty, it has logic.